Welcome. I am Ben Wiener, and I think I'll get my title correct. I think I serve as the chair of the Los Angeles Regional Chapter of the Chicago Society. On behalf of the university, I would like to welcome you all here to this Chicago Insights event, and thank you all for your generosity and for your participation in these kinds of events that keep our community sustained and vibrant. Chicago Insights is a program that we're doing around the world, bringing alumni together, bringing members of the Chicago Society together to talk about different things. And this being Los Angeles, I think it's only appropriate that today's Chicago Insights event focuses on something that's kind of uniquely ours, which is Hollywood, but looks at Hollywood from something else that's uniquely ours, which is a University of Chicago perspective. And as we get into our panel, we'll see how the Chicago education and the business of popular culture intersect in some interesting and surprising ways. The Chicago Society is a group of alumni and parents and friends of the university who support the university with gifts of $2,500 a year or more across all areas of the university. And it's very easy when you see that there are 4,500 donors around the world and that the Chicago Society raised $125 million last year to lose sight of the very, very important role that all of you in this room have played. In the Los Angeles area, the Chicago Society boasts 185 members. And last year, our collective contribution to the university was $18.5 million. That level of generosity and support, particularly in what was a very, very difficult year, is something for which you should all feel a great degree of pride. And it's very, very meaningful to me that the mission of the university is important enough to us all that we sustained it at that level. If you would like to become more involved in the Chicago Society or are looking for other ways to extend your support for the university, please feel free to seek me out. Otherwise, please just keep doing what you're doing, because it's enough. Before I introduce our moderator and before I introduce Bill Michael, I'd first like to acknowledge Mike Clouden. Where's Michael? Thanks to his generosity, we have this wonderful space and this wonderful food, and this event would not have been possible without him. So thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Bill Michael. Before I got up here, somebody said be entertaining, and it's tough with some of this material. So, William Michael, AB 92, is Assistant Vice President of Student Life in the University and Associate Dean in the College, and the Executive Director of the Riva and David Logan Center for Creative and Performing Arts, effective January 1st, 2010. I have known Bill for a long time, since I was an undergraduate, as a matter of fact. And I can think of nobody more fit to run a Center for Creative and Performing Arts, with one caveat. I knew Bill when he was running university theater, and he was running university theater, and I had some extra credits to fill before graduation. I decided to take an acting class. And I know Bill had nothing to do with this, but I think I was the first and only person in the history of the University of Chicago to break their nose in an acting class. So while I'm sure there are many fine programs at the Logan Center, I hope safety comes first. Thank you, Bill.
So now the real question is, do I still have a file in my office with whatever report I'm sure I had to write when Ben broke his nose in that acting class? Probably not. I'll make sure safety is highest on our list. Well, thank you so much, Ben, and it's really great to be here from Chicago. And on behalf of the university, I want to add my thanks to Mike and Kevin Clouden for hosting this afternoon's event, and of course to our panelists and all of you for coming out as we both celebrate the University of Chicago's impact on film and the arts more broadly. And I just want to spend a few minutes talking a bit about the arts on campus and where we're headed, but do it in a way that I hope also gives you a flavor for many of the other things happening on campus. Because one of the things that's true about the arts at the university is that they integrate into the whole life of the place, and want to just take some time to update you on life back in Chicago right now. When I look back on over 20 years ago when I decided to enroll at the university and in the college. Like many of you, first and foremost, that decision was based on the incredible passion for ideas and the intellectual energy that permeated campus when I visited. And I'm pleased to say that that energy and that passion still drives the work of our students and our faculty today. But I was also excited about the possibility of working and engaging meaningfully with the arts. And in my case, as Ben has already alluded, that was university theater. I think if my parents had known that I would then not go to law school and stay and run university theater, it might have been a different conversation, but that's okay. But for others, it was screening films at Doc Films, singing in a cappella groups, the Motet Choir, playing in the University Symphony Orchestra, or even painting at Midway Studios. Today, that same spirit of independent student arts activity still thrives, with some new entrants on the scene. We now have a film group called Fire Escape Films, so named because they sat outside Herman Sineiko's office and plotted to create the group on the fire escape. And we have many of the arts organizations that existed when many of you were students, or for those of you that are parents, hopefully your children are engaged with today. But over the last several years, one of the things that's happened is that the arts have really developed into one of the university's core priorities as we continue to build on the strengths of our past but look to our future. Yesterday, I actually spent several hours, I'm not quite sure how we convinced faculty to spend several hours on a Saturday in a meeting, but we did, spent several hours in a faculty meeting on the arts core requirement. It was a chance for faculty across the institution, from art history and cinema and media studies and creative writing and music and theater and performance studies and visual arts, to come together and think about the goals of the arts core curriculum and how we're meeting them. And during that conversation, I was struck by two things. First, it was very clear, acknowledging it was a slightly biased audience, but this is true across the university, that no one questioned the need for all of our college students to engage in a combination of critical analysis and practice that the arts are known for at Chicago. And second, that we were meeting in the new South Campus Residence Hall. And if you've not been on campus in a long time, imagine, in my opinion, gorgeous 800-bed residence hall built up behind Burton Judson that has just brought new, vibrant life to the community south of the Midway, and is working to, and through housing, working to build a much stronger community among our college students. One of the key areas that we continue to invest in Chicago is our recognition that our students, undergraduate and graduate, are continually learning, both inside and outside the classroom, in dining halls, in labs, and on stages across campus. And through this process, they are building stronger community connections. This is why the college is continuing to work to build additional residence halls and to increase the number of students living in housing from 57% to our eventual goal of 70%. It's why we're working to create new opportunities for graduate and professional school students to interact with each other across schools and divisions. And it's one of the reasons why strengthening the arts, which is incredibly helpful in building community on campus, will contribute greatly to our ability to recruit and retain the best students. A few weeks ago, I was talking to one of those students, and she was actually applying to work as an arts management intern for the new Logan Art Center office, which, as has been alluded to, I'm opening on January 1st. She represents the thousands of students that participate in over 75 arts organizations on campus, including Outside the Lines Drawing Club and the Experimental Film Club, or one of the 15 a cappella groups or 7 dance groups that will have new space to rehearse and create, present, and perform in the Logan Arts Center. But she came into my office really excited because she just picked up a postcard about the fact that Tony Kushner was going to be on campus for our new Art Speaks lecture series, which is a citywide and university-wide arts lecture series created by the University Arts Planning Council. And he's coming in part because Court Theater, our professional theater, is putting on one of his plays. But she got a chance to meet him when she was in high school in New York. And she went up to him and talked about the fact that she was going to go to a conservatory to study acting. And he looked at her and said, "Where else have you applied?" And she said, "Well, I've gotten some interesting materials from this university in Chicago." And he said, "Go there. Because you can learn how to act and direct later. But you need to learn about what the art is that you want to create. You need to have ideas about the kind of art you want to create. You ultimately need to learn how to think. And so, according to her, it's because of Tony Kushner that she was made, in my very biased opinion, the smart decision to come to the University of Chicago. It is, in fact, this goal of creating thinking artists that permeates every area of the arts at the University of Chicago. Our Cinema and Media Studies program strongly encourages its students to take courses across the curriculum to understand the context of the work they're doing. And our Department of Visual Arts, when it's recruiting MFA and undergraduate students, highlights a commitment to advancing theory and practice as a unified and sustained investigation. They go on further to say that the history, social thought, philosophy, and aesthetics in and outside the field of artistic practice are a considerable influence of thinking artists. It's Chicago's great tradition of integrated and borderless inquiry, one that refuses departmental boundaries and interdisciplinary constraints, that is particularly manifested in the arts. Because of this commitment, it is essential that the university continue to attract a diverse student body and faculty, thus ensuring that we have a diverse set of perspectives engaged in creative inquiry across the university. This is why we've reaffirmed our commitment to attracting students regardless of their financial status through the Odyssey Scholarship Program and the recently started New Graduate Aid Initiative. It's why we've invested more in supporting diverse perspectives of our students through the revitalization of support for students of color and our LGBTQ student community, and are now focusing our efforts on enhanced support for international students and our students' spiritual life through the leadership of a new dean of Rockefeller Chapel, who is in fact herself a musician and who's bringing new artistic life both into Rockefeller Chapel and to the various spiritual communities across campus. Each of these efforts supports all of our students and faculty by creating an environment where diverse perspectives contribute to education and inquiry. Most recently, the university has announced plans to expand the faculty across the university for the first time in several decades. At a time when our peers are facing significant financial constraint, we have an opportunity to recruit terrific new faculty that will contribute to a wide variety of areas and encourage the boundary crossing approach that is exemplified through our work in the arts and beyond. As I look back on the changes that have occurred since I was a student, one that is most striking is the increase of the number of faculty committed to integrating artistic theory and often practice into their work. These faculty are working across media, including faculty in the Department of Visual Arts who are increasingly interested in the moving image, digital media, performance, and even the physical sciences. In fact, one of our faculty members has a joint appointment in both the university's Computational Institute and the Department of Visual Arts, and he's really focused on really new and interesting questions about visualization and also creating really interesting artwork that is built off of those questions and that visualization. We also have a German film scholar who's really interested not only in film, but how film translates and relates to performance in opera, who serves as a dramaturg at some of our most prestigious opera companies in the world, including at Chicago's Lyric Opera. It's ultimately with this combined strength of our student body, 14% of whom actually want to go on to careers in the arts today, as well as an incredible faculty whose research interests in the arts span the globe, that we are poised to advance the arts in new ways that are distinctly University of Chicago. Today, the arts are central to the life of the university and crucial to its research and educational mission. The arts at Chicago are driven by the creative energy and intellectual fierceness of our faculty, students, and professional visual and performance artists. Scholars, practicing artists, and students are creating new curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular, and public programs that productively combine research, teaching, and creative expression. Through this collaborative work, we are now forging an integrative model that is unique among our peer institutions. Furthermore, the arts at Chicago are shaped by our location in Chicago. Because the university is situated in one of the most culturally rich and diverse cities, and I said one of, in the nation and the world, we have an unparalleled opportunity to create unique and challenging public art programming that will appeal to varied audiences. Under the leadership of the Deputy Provost for the Arts, Larry Norman, and with the support of my colleague Theaster Gates, who's focused on arts and public life and community, and in the future myself, we're going to be partnering and are partnering with our faculty, staff, and student colleagues to advance the arts in 3 key areas. The first that you'll begin to hear us talk more and more about is an area of focus in arts and disciplines. This is a set of work that a group of faculty are doing to really think about the intersection of the creative arts and the more traditional disciplines on campus. And they will be launching, and are working to launch, a new series that builds on the success of the Arts Speaker Series that will bring some of the world's greatest scholars and artists who are interested in the intersection of criticism and practice to our campus for extended residencies. The second is the arts and public life component. As I already alluded to, we're in this wonderful city, and our students and faculty are already engaged in partnership in lots of ways and work through K through 12 education. Our student theater is already working in countless public schools and in partnership with the Southside community and with our Urban Education Institute and the 5 charter schools that the university runs. In addition, we are focused on how, through the actual presentation of the work that our professional arts organizations do, everyone from the Film Studies Center to Court Theater and the Smart Museum and UC Presents, our music presenting organization, we can attract new audiences both from the South Side and the entire city to the arts. All of these organizations also prove a really crucial resource for our faculty and students who are studying and engaging in art. We're also working really hard to strengthen our partnerships with arts organizations, both in the city and, in fact, around the country. In the spring, and there are good ideas at other universities, we're going to finally follow Columbia University and launch a new University Student Arts Pass, which will give our students free admission to several museums and discount tickets to several theaters around the entire city, not only celebrating all of the great work that's happening in downtown Chicago, but in theaters and neighborhoods across the city. We're working hard to create new internships for students, and in fact, there are some people in the audience here who created opportunities for our students in internships, particularly in the arts, but in all areas. Currently in the college, over 700 students each year have a college-sponsored opportunity, either in the United States or abroad, and it is our goal to grow that by over 50%, so that over 50% of our students can have such an opportunity over the course of their 4 years. We also are beginning to focus more on those opportunities for graduate students, particularly those that want to leave the academy. Finally, the college is really engaged in, although we've spent a lot of wonderful years thinking about study abroad, and we'll be thinking a lot about the arts in international context, we realize that some of our students are graduating knowing more about Paris than the city of Chicago. And Paris is a wonderful city. And so we've recently launched a new program called Chicago Studies, which is really focusing our students' efforts on this kind of partnership in the city, and the arts will be a really important piece of that. Finally, the third component, and certainly in my biased opinion, not the last but not the least important, is the fact that on Tuesday we are unveiling the design for the Riva and David Logan Center for Creative and Performing Arts. It will open in the spring of 2012, and it will be a 170,000 square foot building that will be the new home for the strengthened arts faculty, our resident artists, and the student creativity on South Campus, just down, quote unquote, down the street from that new residence hall I referenced earlier. The building has a daring design, and it has programs that are going to express the open and integrative character of the arts at the University of Chicago. When we started working on this many more years ago than I care to admit, because it's a university and it takes us years to do everything, I used to visit other arts centers, and you can imagine I walked into one, and there was this large open lobby that was empty and had no furniture in it, and these 3 Greek Gothic archways, one that had drama etched in stone to the left, one that had visual arts etched in stone in the middle, and one that had music etched in stone to the right. And the person running the building told me with a great glee how they all were keyed separately, and these artists never crossed paths. We are doing the exact opposite. The Logan Arts Center is going to bring together the arts in ways that, in fact, we believe they haven't been brought together before. We've worked with Todd Williams and Billy Chen, 2 architects out of New York, to create a design that we think is going to really build on the distinctiveness of the arts at Chicago. It's designed to really break the interdisciplinary borders and to transcend this traditional compartmentalization. Imagine students working on sets in a shop across the table saw from some visual arts students who are building a sculpture and starting to work with each other. Or students in the new digital media lab sitting there composing music on a computer while another student's working on an Avid system to edit a film and realize that they can write music for their film. These are exactly the kinds of things that we're really excited about seeing happening. Secondly, the center, situated where it is, in Woodlawn and across the Midway will really play a crucial role in opening the creative and critical activity at the university to our neighboring community and to the entire city. It will serve as a southern gateway to campus, and it will be in a really important venue and portal to the community where we expect our own students and faculty, as well as distinguished local and international artists, performers, and scholars to create, lecture, exhibit, perform at this nexus of community partnership. We really do believe this new center is going to be a catalyst for creativity, and it's going to create one of the environments that's going to support our students' work and our faculty work they're already engaged in with each other, with other academic departments, with the professional arts organizations across campus, and of course, all this community arts organizations across the city. Just to give you just a couple more examples, when I started to focus so much on theater and performance studies, but my biases will come through. But recently, we staged, our students staged Urinetown on campus, written by alumni Greg Kotis and Mark Hellman. And Greg and Mark came back to campus and watched the production and gave them feedback in ways that really started to build the kind of student alumni that are so important to us. And our students and our faculty are already thinking about the ways they're going to make use of the two state-of-the-art theatrical performance venues, as well as how they're going to expand their public outreach programs with new space. Our colleagues in music, who already have 14 performance programs that put on over 100 performances, are thinking about how they're going to take advantage of the 450-seat auditorium, as well as what we're calling the Performance Penthouse, which is at the top of the tower with really incredible views of the city. This auditorium is, we think, going to be the premier place in the city of Chicago to see silent film with musical accompaniment, and it's also going to be a great place to see more modern film as well. Also, other students interested in film are going to be taking advantage of incredible new opportunities to use digital technology, as well as a brand new video production teaching studio. Finally, we are adding a 130-seat film screening room of director's quality and a film vault that will allow us to continue to collect the great film that's being created in this city and around the world, so that our scholars and students can use it for a long time. I'm confident that the Logan Arts Center is going to be a dynamic hub for all of the programs that are already happening, and it will be an incredibly visible representation for the importance that the arts are now playing at the university, an importance that is allowing us to strengthen our ability to build community and to celebrate our distinctive approach. Now, no university administrator can ever stand in front of a group of alumni, parents, and friends and not ask for help. And so now that's what I'm here to do. And I hope, as you listen to the panel today and think about our impact on film, and hopefully think about some of what I've said, that you'll think about helping us spread the word. We are a university not known for being as important in the arts world as we should be. And in fact, we know that already we've made great impacts here, and if we can do more, it will help us to recruit and retain some of our best students and faculty. If you happen to be available and are sitting at a computer on Tuesday, we will be unveiling the designs of the new Logan Arts Center, and we'll have a real great conversation with the two architects about how they think about architecture and art and space to present the Logan Center. I invite you to watch it streaming live online. And if you don't have time to do that, I promise you there'll be a 5-minute edited down version available online the next day. But I hope that you'll take a visit to the arts.uchicago.edu website and help us spread the word on all that's happening at the University in the Arts. Several of you in this audience, and I think I just saw Mary Lou Henner walk in, was kind enough to come speak to some of our students and talk about their own work in the arts. And certainly if you're ever back in Chicago, we'd love to have opportunities for you to join and talk with our students in whatever field you represent. And of course, if you have access to internships or full-time jobs, I'd love to learn more about that so we can have our students and meet that goal. Finally, I want to join Ben in thanking you, not just for being here today, but being a really important part of our community, because you make all that we do, both in the arts and beyond, possible. Your contributions of ideas, time, and the financial resources you've given have helped us get where we are today, and you're going to help us sustain our momentum as we continue to build our strength in the arts and support what is, in my very biased opinion, to quote a former president, the best university in this or any other known galaxy. So thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to introduce our panel moderator, Kevin Clouden, who got a dual degree from both the college and the social sciences in 1994 and is the managing economist at the Milken Institute. His research has focused on the roles played in regional economics by demographic and spatial factors, including distribution of resources, business locations, and movements of labor. And he tells me that much of that work has really been focused on the film industry and the entertainment industry. He also, in a past life, worked for a video gaming company and was an adjunct professor of geography at Santa Monica College and on the editorial board of Millennium, an international affairs journal. It's my pleasure to introduce Kevin Clouden.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you don't mind, for the sake of a more congenial atmosphere, I'm actually going to moderate down here, although this does not mean by any shape or form that I'm going to try and take over the conversation, because truth be told, I'm here to ask questions and get everybody else in this distinguished panel talking, not to take up too much of your time. Today, we actually have a wonderful panel comprised of three intelligent, well-versed panelists who have a wide variety of experiences in the film industry, as well as television and ancillary items, and for that matter, the online world, and a few other things as well. I'm going to go in the order in which everybody's seating, which does not suggest anything one way or the other. But to my immediate left is Charles Chuck Levitt, who is a university graduate back in a distant past year, which in 1976, which is really not that bad, all things considered. No. But in fact, that's a theme that we'll repeat once again. But he has an experience in a number of different areas in relation to screenwriting, and in particular has been involved in securing rights and securing the writing experience for a number of different films, in particular The Mighty, Blood Diamond, K-Pax, and most recently, I guess your on-current project is Confessions of a Wall Street Shoeshine Boy.
Right. I just finished that.
Just finished, in fact. To his left is our intrepid pinch hitter, Hal Lieberman, who has very, very graciously stepped in when David Bernardi was not able to make it today. And Hal, in fact, has apparently not only been willing to step in today, for which we're very grateful, but is also going to be doing a workshop at the university in a few months as well, I believe. And he has a very varied experience in the industry. He not only spent time doing everything from being an assistant to Warren Beatty to doing screenwriting himself. He was also a very successful studio executive, and then has where he was at Universal, and then has ventured off on his own to have his own production company, where he's done a number of different films in recent years, ranging from Bridget to Terabithia to Terminator 3, to Around the World in 80 Days, as well as a few others. In fact, he has a couple upcoming films, as well as an upcoming television project that he just recently has with Sci-Fi Channel, which is great. And to his left is another individual with a very distinguished and varied past, in Yair Landau, who has done everything when he was at Sony Pictures Digital to being an executive, former vice chairman at Sony Pictures Entertainment, to doing a lot of overseeing their CGI work, to overseeing a number of different films. And in particular, for me, the scary background part is that he oversaw Sony Online Entertainment, which I will say that once upon a time I actually lost some employees to one of his products, being EverQuest, and more or less that not that they went to work there, but that I never saw them again because they stayed home online all the time. He has now has his own investment company and does his own investing, and indeed runs a number of different ventures, including mass animation, and has also and has been involved in a number of different venues in relation to technology investing, and is still definitely involved in the entertainment industry. For today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a couple questions to everybody that will just, and then I'll do my best to stay out of the way. Chuck, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you first. Just say, when you're working on your writing, where do you look for source material in particular? Is that source material, has any of that changed over the past decade or two?
Well, the first part of the question is that actually source material comes to me. I don't look for it that much. I get offered different, sort from. I mean, I've done a lot of adaptation, so I've been offered books, comic books, graphic novels, children's books, and now in the past few years, there's this trend toward trying to adapt things like board games and toys and theme park rides into movies. So that is a big change, especially for someone used to trying to, reinvent dense literary material, and then you get offered Disney's Jungle Cruise to adapt. It's kind of a different process completely.
And just remember, there really is money in that. Any of you who went to any of the 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies, absolutely, or the 2 Transformers movies or anything else, they're very serious about this at this point. So
they are. No, and that's what they're spending the bulk of their money on now, or these projects that they think are what they call 4-quadrant movies that will bring in young, old, male, and female. And I mean, for a writer, it's the same process. You just have to find some kind of inspiration to, whether it's in a book or whether it's in a game, a board game. If you can somehow find something to inspire yourself, you'll come up with you'll come up with something.
A number of years ago, when they released the movie based off the board game Clue, everybody thought that was a novelty and that they were just doing that once. But apparently, I'm sure at some point or another, there's going to be
Monopoly,
yes.
Risk, Battleship. There's 3 games right now.
Yes, and it would be interesting to see how, in terms of being a writer, how you actually managed to create a plot out of those.
You can do it it's. I mean, especially if you have to, or if someone's dangling a big paycheck in front of you, you can come up with something like that. It's not too, I mean, we all look for different things. I personally look for a character. If there's some character that I can sink my teeth into or invent or something, that's pretty much the basis of inspiration for me. Aristotle. I mean, I wasn't the most exemplary student at the University of Chicago, but a little bit of Aristotle did rub off on me. And, what I always kept from him was that in the Poetics that, from character springs all action. So what I look for is, if there's some character, and I'm sure in a board game you could come up with some character that could drive a movie.
Well, just adding to that, I mean, I'm one of the guys that supposedly brings some of the material to Chuck for him to think about adapting. But I think one of the things to talk about today is the state of original material, in Hollywood and elsewhere, and how it's become more difficult to take just a good idea and grow it, because unless there's a business underneath the idea, built on another prior business, people are afraid to step forward and go forward. So, my job as producer is to try to mine a lot of different wells. And if you look at the movie credits that I've had, they go from esteemed books to other people's movies that I've then done sequels on. but rarely do I get a chance to just do a flat-out original idea. And so, Chuck, what do you say? By the way, that's something that I ask myself all the time, because as producer, my job is to go to writers and say, what about this or what about that? And can you find inspiration in that character or a piece of business and grow it?
I think that's one of the things that's actually most scary, I think, coming at it from as a consumer and as a producer in today's world, is that I'd say today's studio environment finds it very hard to basically not even greenlight, just to develop original properties. I think it's very hard to actually to get a studio to even seriously pursue a writer with an original piece of intellectual property. It's much easier to come in and say, nobody's made the Scrabble movie yet. I've got a really good take on the letter S, and could you, and
S is the villain.
And I think I think that periodically people talk about the death of creativity in Hollywood, and this goes in cycles. And if you look over the history of the industry and you go, there was a period of time when everything was all big budget musicals, and then lo and behold, people stopped going to see them and started going to see more independent, edgier films. I think as somebody who was partially responsible for the extreme number of comic book movies, I think that you'll see a death of that as well. I think that eventually the audience will tire and bore, and somebody else will come up with an original idea, and they'll continue to survive.
Well, I have nothing against comic book movies. I love comic books. I grew up reading them. But I think you're right that it's a cyclical thing that, right now, every studio executive or producer I have a meeting with, is bemoans the death of the adult drama. Nobody's making these adult dramas anymore. But, they all admit that it's cyclical, and that sooner or later, these other things will come back. You're right.
I think that the thing is, it's also become a much more mass market, opening weekend mass event driven business, and the world we all exist in is a much more rapid, intense media world where everybody's attention span is much shorter, and the studios are basically playing to that, and the nature of making and releasing a film has changed as a function of that.
Absolutely. I mean, the days as a former studio executive, I used to hear writers come in and pitch stories about their world, their families, their children, whatever, and if it had a real emotional pull to it, I might put it in development and see if something great came out. That's not happening today. And I guess the question, one of the questions that you asked, Kevin, in asking which questions you'll be asking is, what do we see in the future here? And it's that middle ground of stories. How will that come back? Will there be a financial model that makes it, return? I don't have the answer for that yet. But I know as a moviegoer and as a filmmaker, producer, I want it. And I miss it. I'm of a certain age where, of course, I'll gravitate to certain films. But when I look at the films that I watched growing up, they were adult. In fact, when I was in Chicago, All the President's Men came out, and those were the films that I cut my teeth on. And it's not to say that they're not happening today, but they're more difficult to happen. And so I guess part of the job is figuring out how to make a return.
Now, one of the things I know that's been particularly shaping films for, in a lot of ways, on the positive side, but also there's a flip side in terms of the constraints it also offers, is the changing technology that's been going on behind the industry. That, what kind of films that you might not have been able to make, whether in terms of computer-generated animation or visual effects or otherwise, that you could create whole backdrops of not only cities, but of magical worlds and magical creatures at a much lower cost point than you might have otherwise. It certainly made a number of films possible, but that also shapes, I guess, the kind of films being made. And I know you were directly involved in a lot of that.
Yeah, I ran visual effects and animation at Sony, and I would say transformationally, from a storytelling standpoint, over the last decade, we reached a point where anything you could conceive of, we could actually bring to the screen visually in a realistic manner. And I think that was a pretty meaningful change in terms of filmmaking. And I think one of the reasons that Spider-Man worked the way it did as a film versus as a cheesy TV series in the 80s is because you felt as much when Spider-Man was swinging through the streets of Manhattan as you did when Peter Parker was talking to Mary Jane, because we made it look as realistic when he was doing that as when they were standing there together. And literally the technology to make that happen didn't exist 12 years ago. But the downside effect of that is just because you can create anything doesn't mean you should. Mm-hmm. And we're now in an era where, some of that really overwhelms it. I will say, going to Transformers, the reason I think the first one was as successful as it was is because it did tell a universal story. It was a boy who wanted to impress a girl, and he went and got a car. And that goes back to, it goes back to American Graffiti. It's essentially the same character with the same issue. The Transformers enhanced your experience of it, but that's the reason the first movie was good and the second movie was bad.
I agree. And one of the questions that you had asked is, what were the hurdles in making Terminator? And the biggest hurdle was that, which was when Cameron made the first two, and they were, to my mind, brilliant films. It crossed over to a new place in special effects, and so our job, taking the next installment of it, was, well, how can you can you better that? Can you equal that? It was always our goal to do that. I'll let you folks determine whether we did or not. It was making it real, and T2, I think, was the beginning of really pushing it over into another place, and so as producer of T3, that was a big bar to climb over.
In point of fact, one of the things to remember, the T2, everybody made a big deal of was the morphing technology, the whole changing the shape of the Terminator 1000 robot that could change into another person's appearance and objects and everything like that.
Right.
And that by the time a few years after that had happened, it had become so ubiquitous that you started seeing it in cheesy commercials where somebody would throw money at something and have an object morph into a cheesy commercial product, and at that point it stopped being novel. It became that somebody was willing to spend money on it for a commercial Super Bowl or otherwise. That lure of that appearance wasn't there anymore. You had to go back to making it.
Look, I agree with that. And when I first saw the rushes on T3, where the bullets are hitting the female Terminator and using somewhat of the same trick, I was deathly afraid that audiences were going to go, "This is passé. We've seen it." And interestingly, they didn't seem to care. They stayed with it in spite of the fact that it wasn't brand new. That there was a female Terminator was enough to get them cooking anyway, and that Arnold was still running after them. They were still aboard. So lucky me for that moment.
But I do think, Kevin, your point is a really important one, because what happens is when you're risking $100 million or $100 million plus to tell a story like that, and the audience can see it in a tire commercial on TV, they're most often not going to be satisfied with it. And so the audience continues. What's happening from a technology standpoint is the audience's expectations continuously raise the bar. That it's not adequate in most cases to show them something that they saw even 2 years ago, let alone 10 years ago.
I just want to pick up one thing that Yair said, and that with technology you can get as expensive and as wow as you want, but really the movies that are successful, really successful, are the ones that have that good old-fashioned storytelling somehow there. And it's true with the first Spider-Man. It was true with Iron Man. It was true with Terminator 2, which was like a fatherless child, and this is his father figure. I mean, these are, they're these classic tropes and classic stories that all audiences can identify with. And we've seen huge movies that have been made, like $200 million movies, that have completely bombed because it's the story or the characters that nobody connects with.
That doesn't mean that every great money-making film has absolutely incredible writing, although it certainly does help, and it certainly helps if you want to go back and see it again and again or build off of it. Right. And on the other hand, when, looking at writing is that, one of the classic areas for taking stories is to go back to books, to go back to some of these older source material. And there was a time where you could count the sheer number of Shakespeare adaptations that had been made in Hollywood that they'd get, they wouldn't quite get to the triple digits, but you'd have 30 or 40 variations, especially in the early years. And when you adapt a movie and you take it from the original source material, you have the advantage that there's a built-in audience, but you also have to deal with expectations. And if the author is still alive, you have to deal with the expectations of the author. Now, Hal, I know that Bridge to Terabithia was definitely one of the.
You make the son the producer.
Yeah. You're taking it as a source material, and as a producer,
yes.
You have to deal with it.
And you had to be, and we were very sensitive to it. I mean, for me, that project was in reading the book, and it was a beloved book. Fifth graders read it all over the country. It's a Newbery winner. When I read the book, I needed time alone to get over my tears. It really moved me. It was powerful, and it's a little book. And so, coming on as filmmaker with it, my entire goal was to try to recreate what I had felt reading that book. So, what were the core integrities of the book? About friendship and about death and about family and all of that stuff that, frankly, does not seem like a Disney movie at all. At least certainly not in the traditional sense. Catherine Patterson, she was aboard as a consultant. Her son was one of the producers, and she had, she could comment on where we were going, but she had an open mind. I mean, in reading the book, there was virtually nothing going on in Terabithia. There was no real animation there. It was all left to the mind. But in the movie, and if you've seen the movie, you have to create something in Terabithia because it's a movie. So they were kind enough to let us, again, work organically within the book and create characters inside Terabithia that had a relationship with the character outside of Terabithia. And, look, I've been making movies now for a while, lots of different types of movies. And that for me is the one that stands out as a happy experience because it was financially successful, which is very nice, but it also was very touching. And, and she was very pleased with the final product, and that meant an awful lot to me. And look, I watched that movie with my own kids who are grown, and it was just one of those great parent moments. So that one's for me.
Now, just to contrast that for a second, when you were working, you had sort of a different situation. When we were working on Blood Diamond, I know you had the situation where you had to deal with some real life factors, certainly the diamond industry and some of the fact that you were dealing with some real political issues and otherwise, as in terms of expectations. How did you manage that? And
well, the project came about. Just going back to the origins of it, Warner Brothers had come to me with they had had a previous script that they'd had in development for a number of years, and it was kind of an Indiana Jones type story about these two white guys in Africa who, with this rare diamond, and they're running around and getting, all these bad guys are following them with helicopters and stuff. And they wanted this kind of action Indiana Jones type of a story, and I wasn't interested in that. But I had, the issue of conflict diamonds or blood diamonds was something that I had done my own research on, and for some future project. And I just saw the opportunity there to just tell them, if you guys want to really do a movie about diamonds in Africa, forget about this story and let me pitch you my own story. And I did, that took place during the Sierra Leone Civil War in the 90s. And they said, well, the executive who was on the project at the time said, that really sounds interesting. Why don't you come back with a story, and we'll maybe pursue that. So I did. I and I did extensive research on it, interviews with people in the diamond industry and people who had worked at Doctors Without Borders at refugee camps and in Sierra Leone at the time, and poured over all these UN documents and Global Witness accounts, and I came up with the characters, these two main characters, and I came back to Warner Brothers and pitched them this whole story, and they said, let's do that. So that's pretty much how it came about.
And did you?
But we had to, and it's all based on factual things. The lead African character, who I wanted to be this kind of African everyman who had all these terrible things happen to him, was kind of cobbled together from the accounts of a number of refugees, and the Leonardo DiCaprio character I kind of took. I took like the Humphrey Bogart character from Treasure of Sierra Madre, and kind of transferred him to this new arena, and that's how that came about. So.
Well, you realize that, and we realized that Leonardo DiCaprio and Humphrey Bogart were connected on such an intimate level.
Yeah, through 2 degrees of separation.
Now, in adapting material and figuring out new mediums, you're working on with mass animation now. You've got a whole different venue going on now.
Well, it actually ties to part of the conception behind it and the approach tied to what I saw in terms of how difficult it was to get original stories told. We launched Sony Pictures Animation. We launched in the context of the history of CGI animation companies. We launched it relatively late, started the company in 2002, and produced a couple of original stories. Open Season, Surf's Up, and the third film was a adaptation of a children's book, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Our second film was a documentary-style story about penguins and a young penguin who pursues his dreams of becoming a successful surfer. And we had a phenomenal cast. I had Shia LaBeouf and Jeff Bridges and Zooey Deschanel and James Woods, and it was a wonderful story. And it really struggled in the marketplace. And it was a well-told story. It was very well received by the critics and by audiences, and it's nominated for an Academy Award. But basically, when it came out, people felt like they had seen Penguin movies, and they didn't know this story, and we didn't manage to introduce the character set enough for them to go opening weekend. So one of the things I was looking at when I started producing animation independently is, if I want to tell stories with original characters, how do I introduce them to the world? And looking at using technology to basically familiarize our audience with our characters before our movie comes out. And so I decided to make a movie with a wiki platform and literally use Facebook to build an animation pipeline and invite the world in to both make the movie as well as to watch it, and essentially build a fan base for a character set that didn't exist before. And in part as a means of addressing, okay, I have an original idea, how do I introduce it to the world? Because it's not Risk or The Jungle Cruise. It's a love story between a guitar and a violin. And basically I developed this story and then built this Facebook application and invited people to come and participate. And we got tens of thousands of people to come and review our film as it was being developed. We developed a short film as a test of this process, and recently completed it, and are attaching it to a theatrical release in a couple of weeks. So it'll be pieces called Live Music, and it'll be attached to a film called Planet 51. And essentially what we did was introduce original characters and get thousands of people engaged in telling the story, in the hopes that those thousands of people will then tell tens of thousands more to go see the movie.
I like that idea.
I'll go see that.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I like it.
Yeah, that's great.
So I mean, it's interesting because I think that while technology has limited some aspects of the industry, I think ultimately what it's doing on a global level is it's allowing more and more people to get involved in high-quality storytelling. And I think it's wonderful that we're here in Hollywood and that we get a chance to pursue this art form. But as somebody who started on the outside and got into animation relatively late and saw how hard it was, and sees how universal the storytelling is, the reason CGI animation has taken off the way it has is because it's still a place where people pursue really universal stories. And it's also because no matter where you are in the world, if you're a child and you see an animated film, you feel like it's yours. Because it's dubbed into the local language, and so when kids see it in Mexico City, they see Mexican characters, and when kids see it in Berlin, they see German characters. And my view behind mass animation is that kids in Mexico and kids in Berlin should also be able to make CGI animated movies. You don't have to physically shoot it on location, and the technology is kind of broadly available. And I think that the interesting thing in tying to kind of where I hope the U of C goes artistically is that it empowers more and more people to tell stories no matter where they are. I think that you in order to be a successful screenwriter, for the most part, you have to live in LA because that's where the people who call you up and offer you the jobs are. But I think as we move into a more network world, you should be able to create content and high-quality content anywhere.
Certainly makes a lot of sense. And the international marketplace certainly has become a bigger and bigger factor, not only in terms of source material, but also in terms of determining what gets made and where the markets are. When I was younger, I remember that there was this rumor that went around that the only reason that Police Academy movies kept on getting sequels was because they kept on making lots of money in Scandinavia. And I proceeded at one point to mention this to somebody I knew who lived in Denmark, and he was absolutely horrified. He said he swore that neither he nor any of his friends had ever gone to see a Police Academy movie. But it's certainly very true that not only in films and television that the international market is a significant factor. There have been a number of television shows that get syndicated or distributed where people know that there's a huge market for overseas. Baywatch is always the classic example of it, that it got canceled on network television, but it continued in syndication because it made tons of money overseas. But with movies now, that's a real factor, and I think it's one of the factors also in assessing risk is what can make money here but also can make money overseas. And how has that affected, for each of you, how has that affected things? Is it positive or negative?
I think it depends upon the project. I mean, whenever I try to sell a project anywhere, it's usually director, cast, budget, idea. Maybe not in that order. So the foreign appeal, I mean, I was just working with a company, not to get too specific, where the actor was, they were figuring him out foreign, see how much he was worth foreign, and his worth determined how much money I would have to make the movie. And in that particular incarnation of the film, I didn't have enough money to make the movie. So that's one package, as they say, where you go, okay, put it over here and repackage it so that I can make still a quality film, if not with the same actor, then with a director who is willing. That's one thing I want to talk about, too, is that, there are a lot of films out today where, I mean, you look at District 9, where it's the appetite of the filmmaker. Some people, look, I'm certainly guilty of spending a lot of money on Terminator. Not that I spent the money, but I was part of the machine that spent the money. I mean, that movie was $178 million of negative cost, which is crazy. It made back the money and then some, but that's an awful lot of money. And if you're willing to do it for less and find a way, and I'm sure Mary, you know this, you can make a movie for less money. It's just what are you willing to do as a filmmaker, and how do you want to present yourself, and how, there's a word throw away, but how creative can you be about creating an environment? So anyway, what was the initial point?
I have to your point about Police Academy movies. How many of you have seen Ice Age 3?
Strong.
There's 3 people in the audience. Ice Age 3 is now the highest grossing film of all time outside the United States. Of all time. By a pretty meaningful amount. I believe the last tally was like over $800 million outside in box office outside the U.S. And to give you an indicia of, and it wasn't like the film wasn't successful here, but it certainly wasn't on. And that character set is, and that comedy is genuinely beloved in meaningful parts of the world. And we're talking, this is a film that went out and outgrossed Titanic in the UK, in Germany, in France, in Spain. And so there are certain aspects of the world that franchise exists as a function of Ice Age 2's success outside the United States. And so it's an interesting thing from a storytelling standpoint and from a writing standpoint. The physical comedy in that series is what drives its success. And, pratfalls are a universal language.
They are. Yeah, definitely. There's like another aspect too, especially if you're trying to set up movies that are like dramatic movies. You have to. A lot of studios are, they won't admit this, but they take into account like the social mores and prejudices of overseas audiences too. Things like I was pitching this sports movie, and they'll say, well, sports, unless it's basketball, it's not going to play overseas. Forget about that. Will Smith is the only African American actor who is bankable overseas now. And if you try and pitch a story with an African American lead, you will always get. What you come back with is, well, who are we going to play against him? It's got to be a two-hander. We've got to have like a Leonardo DiCaprio or a Matt Damon or somebody else has got to do this, because they're, large audiences, overseas just will not go to see that kind of a movie. So, and studios have to take all these things into account when they're going to shell out money for movies like that.
Yeah, I was at Universal when Adam Sandler first crossed over from television. I was involved in his first 3 movies, Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore, and then Bulletproof. And they weren't that high on Adam at the time because he had no foreign appeal whatsoever. And so the way that we dealt with his early movies were we gave him $10 million and said, okay, basically do with it as you will. I was the executive on the project. He made the most of it and gets a lot more than that. But I think Adam is finally beginning to cross over, but still not as big as you would expect, given that his salary is so humongous these days. But yeah, budgets are largely determine how much foreign play you get.
Now, when you're trying to figure something, going back and backtracking just a little bit, when you're going back and looking at a project, and obviously from the production side of things in particular, but and you're trying to get rights to something that you say, okay, we've established this is going to be a hot property, and even if it is a board game, and you're in a lot of cases, I know that things have flipped around now, and you have the source material companies actually have their own production companies and want a piece of the pie, like Marvel. But when you're creating that kind of negotiations with something like that, how complicated does it actually get in terms of? I know that sometimes how you'd mentioned that like somebody involved with the source material might want a producing credit, or they might want a certain piece of the merchandising. I know that the notorious example was always George Lucas when he did the Star Wars sequels, that he actually, even going back to the first one, that he gave up a lot but kept the merchandising rights, and of course nobody would ever do that again. They'd never let the producer keep all the merchandising. Right. But how complicated does it get, and how do you work that out? I know, I know you were dealing with Spider-Man, that was a notoriously difficult issue to extricate all the rights.
In Spider-Man's case, the rights were fragmented in 4 different companies, and all of the people associated with it assumed that the film would never get made. And actually, that was when we spent I spent several years at Sony pursuing those rights and bartering in various iterations. Sony had a piece of the rights through one aspect of it, and MGM had a piece of the rights, and
Didn't Fox have a piece of it or not?
Fox did not have it. Fox had a piece of a bunch of the other Marvel characters, and Marvel still had a piece of the rights. And MGM had a piece of the rights, and Paramount believed they had a piece of the rights, and so so everybody assumed it would never get made. And Sony was involved in litigation with MGM over a rogue piece of Bond intellectual property. And as part of the settlement of that, MGM said, "Here, you can have these rights. This will never get made." And then Paramount lost its litigation, and then we were in negotiation with Marvel for 2 years over the rights. And then as soon as the film came out and was a huge success, they sued us and threatened to never make none of the other movies because even though they had made a lot of money, Sony had made more money than they wanted Sony to make. That's part of how Marvel ended up in their own studio business. In the case of Iron Man, even though Paramount was the distributor, Marvel made almost all the money, and Paramount made very little.
Now, if you're dealing with a slightly simpler, so we say simpler rights issue, then that scary one, and I know that the James Bond story that went on with that is absolutely scary as well. I guess a lot of that had to do with the fact that Ian Fleming used a character from a movie that he hadn't written the book in yet, and then got sued by the author of the screenplay for the rights, and then that went back and forth for decades. But I guess that when you're dealing with something that potentially is like Terabithia, where it's more straightforward, how do you negotiate something like that? Do you just
Directly with the author. Look, they need to feel that your intentions are honest and that you'll do have some integrity in the translation, that you'll involve them, and really that's it. It's actually personal. Something like Spider-Man is for me as a producer. That's huge business, and the kind of producing that I've been doing it's smaller. But then again, if there's a huge property that I can actually compete for, I might try. But the odds are somebody else is going to gobble it up and not me.
Now, one thing I know that we bandied about when I was originally talking about things for the panel, and I just want to go back and revisit because we edged around it, is that there's a lot of changes that have gone cyclically in the industry right now, that everything is very much, that people are risk averse, that they're really looking for things that they can market right out of the box and everything like that. And I know that in each case, each of you has been involved in the industry long enough to see things change one way or the other. What basically has happened to the independents? Obviously, as an independent producer, how you've got a bit of perspective also as well beyond the
but I'm not the traditional independent films. I'm not really producing. I mean, most of the deals that I have are set up, or not most, all are set up at the major studios, and they're all essentially studio fodder. Now, some of that's because of where I come from. I kind of grew up in Hollywood, or whatever. I mean, studio executive, and so that's the language that I'm comfortable speaking. But in terms of the more indie film, which are actors telling great stories written by great writers, smaller in scope perhaps. Where are they? I don't know. I just hope that we find a way to mine them again, and that there's a financial model to make them breathe, because I think they're missed, and I miss them as a moviegoer.
No, Chuck, you actually, you actually had that where when you did The Mighty, that was done as more
Well, it was Miramax.
Right.
So and at that time, Miramax was not. You could consider it an independent, but it was it had financing, and they were able to pay, and it was a small movie. I think the budget was $7 million, but I don't know that that experience was really an independent experience. There was no nobody was tearing their hair out because financing had stopped at any point or anything like that. So.
Studios used to have, they would allow themselves a pocket of more indie type films because the exposure was less, the upside was less, but it'd be part of their portfolio. They were building libraries at the time. The concerns are very different today. The reason for making movies is different than it was 20 years ago. People don't come in just to build libraries. They're looking to, build different ways of distribution, open up the world. So, where you used to be able to make those smaller films, and if you made $1 million or $2 million profit, you'd go, that was good. Now it's not. Frankly, if you make $1 million or $2 million, they'd prefer to write that down, and not be bothered with it, and that's why you don't see them. So, if you look at the by and large studio slates today, you've got really big movies, the occasional flyer, the smaller ones. But if you look at what's in the middle, there's
nothing.
There is no middle.
There's nothing in the middle.
Yeah, and that makes it sometimes less interesting. But this is where we are today, so you gotta make the best of it.
No, you're actually trying to work around that.
Yeah, I was actually. I think part of the issue from an independent standpoint actually is that there are a lot more independent films than there ever have been. The reality is that on any given weekend, there are half a dozen small budget, independently financed, independently distributed films that come out, and the reality is that that's too many for the marketplace to accommodate. There are a lot more people who are capable of making movies today and do. The problem is there aren't as many people out in the audience who are going to go see them, and we all grew up in an era where screens were constrained, and then eventually it came on TV, and then at some point it came out on video, and the reality is that the average child today is exposed to more films by the time they're 12 than people in this audience were by the time they were 35. Because there are hundreds of channels of television. Everything is available on DVD. Everything is available on download. So there is just a massive amount of content that gets produced, and it's really hard to break through that clutter, both as somebody who makes the content and as somebody who distributes it. And so what that's doing is it's driving the edges. Really, a lot of really low budget stuff, half a dozen a weekend. And then the handful of giant franchises where the studio's all in, and they're putting all their money behind it, and they're trying to build the next Harry Potter, the next Spider-Man, the next Transformers, in the hope that they can create something that people will go see again and again.
It's funny, just also sort of how it works. For my vaguely whimsical side today, I'm wearing my Happy Indiana Jones tie because he's the one well-known fictional University of Chicago graduate who's done well in the movies. But it's worth noting that, ironically, that George Lucas, and obviously with Steven Spielberg, was essentially a combination of both a looking back type film, in that he was going back to the old movie serials of the 1930s, but also very clearly a unique independent property and get it made, and obviously it turned into a franchise like everything else. But that he was able to get it done to a certain extent because of the time period, and to a certain extent because, well, he'd done Star Wars, and he could pull the money based on results. But nowadays, I guess that things have gone cyclically, so it's a lot harder to, no matter who you are, to look at this original property and get it made. Now, just looking at the future, just to sort of sum things up, not to be optimistic or pessimistic, but where do you see, and not to put you too much on the spot, where do you see things going, and where do you want to see things going to a certain extent? Chuck, if you'd be willing.
Yeah, that's I'm not sure. Obviously, I'd like to see more movies that I would go pay $12 to go see. Like movies that have some kind of meaning, social meaning. That have characters, that there's some kind of story there, that that it's not made for people with attention deficit disorder. It's all like all the time. And the interesting thing is that TV, some television is becoming like a refuge for that kind of storytelling. I mean, the project I'm doing right now, just as a change of pace, I'm writing this HBO movie that's going to be about the Hillary Obama primary fight of 2008, and it's based on a book that has yet to come out by these two journalists. And I find that, but we're telling it as a dramatic story, with actors and everything. And it's just, I'm having a blast doing this because it's a process which, I can actually tell a story, and I don't have to, think about, how many people in China are going to go see it or something like this. And it's, so for me, it's a great, it's like a kind of a refuge. And there are a lot of writers who are kind of, dramatic writers who find, places like HBO as, or, some of these cable venues as places where they can really finally, tell some stories. So I don't know. But, the whole marketplace is changing. I mean, the way we're going to see movies is good in 5 years. It's going to be completely different than the way we see them now in terms of... especially after theatrical releases. I don't know if DVDs will probably not be around, and we'll get everything, right on the screen. I mean, I just think things are cyclical, and eventually there'll be this hunger for, wanting to see some kind of, content that has some kind of depth and meaning to it, and and hopefully they'll be able to make money again on those.
Al?
So.
I second what Chuck has to say. I mean, I think you said it. Quality stuff and a way to see it, so it's carved out so it's there, and an interesting portfolio of stuff to see, so that you're just not having Chinese food every night. You're having every food that you enjoy, including Chinese. That's what I hope happens. What will happen? I'll be around to find out. You're up.
I'm a big believer that storytelling always wins out, and at the end of the day, there are some years when there are more good stories told, and there's some years where there are less good stories told, but on balance, people still go see compelling characters go through amazing journeys, and maybe some of those journeys are happening less in adult dramas set in bedroom communities, and more of them are happening in conjunction with aliens. But I think that at the end of the day, people are still resonating with them for the same reason, and I don't think that that's going to change. I think that's that goes back to the cave, if you will, and it just our campfire has gotten much bigger and brighter and more digital.
I just want to add, you're right. I mean, there's still really great movies being made, small movies. I mean, in the past 3 or 4 years, I've seen, some of the best movies that I've ever seen in my life, that have come out, that's small movies. So, it's not going to go away.
Just have to make sure we get a chance to see them.
Right.
Well, I'd like to, at this point, say thank you very much to the panelists, and say unless there's, and thank you very much to all of you for coming. And I hope that everybody learned something, enjoyed something. And if you have anything to add, obviously we're nice and interactive, and can come up and talk. And otherwise, I'm not to scare the panel, not to scare anybody away, but in any respect, thank you again, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks.